One of the icons of Orthodox Judaism in the last century was the late Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik of saintly memory. And in one of his lectures, he shared the following story from his youth. He said when he was around 8 years old, he attended a cheder in a little town in the border of White Russia and Russia proper. His teacher happened to be a follower of Chabad. So one winter day, he says, we were sitting in class studying the Torah portion of Vayigash. In this particular portion, the Torah tells of the biblical episode in which the brothers of Joseph are standing before the powerful viceroy of Egypt, who had taken their younger brother Benjamin hostage, not knowing all the while that the viceroy in front of him was their own brother Joseph. And in making his case to the viceroy, Judah recounts what had happened. My lord asked his servants, Hayesh lochem av ach, do you have a father or a brother? And we told you we have an old father and we have a young brother. And he's recounting everything that took place in this great episode that many in the world now know as Joseph and his technicolor color coat. But this Rebbe of Rabbi Soloveitchik keys in on this phrase, Hayesh lochem av. Do you have a father? And at that point, the teacher jumps to his feet. He motions for the boy to stop reading. He turns in the direction of the young Rabbi Soloveitchik, who was 8 years old at the time. And in a booming voice, he challenges him, tell me, Yeshiber, what kind of question did Joseph ask his brothers? Hayesh lochem av. Do you have a father? Of course they had a father. Everybody has a father. The only person in history who didn't have a father was Adam. Everyone else had a father. What kind of question? Hayesh lochem av. So I tried explaining that what Joseph really meant is your father still alive? To which the Rebbe asked me, why didn't he then say, is your father still alive? He said, Hayesh lochem av, did you have a father? So I didn't know the answer. And the Rebbe continued and he said, my dear children, Joseph was not asking about their father's physical presence. He was asking about his spiritual presence in their lives. He was not asking about literal parents in their biological sense. He was asking about conceptual parents in the existential sense. Are you rooted in your father? That's what Joseph was asking his brothers. Do you look upon your father like branches look upon their tree? Do you see him as the foundation of your existence? Or are you just a band of ruthless shepherds who have forgotten their origins and wander from pasture to pasture? Do you honor the traditions of your father? Or do you think they're outdated? Hayesh lochem av, do you have a father? Is the spirit of your father apparent within you? Are you proud of your father? Do you acknowledge that there is so much you can and must learn from him and from his father before him? Hayesh lochem av, does the spirit of the generations past occupy its rightful place in your life? That's not just the question that Joseph was asking this group of brothers in front of him. That's a question the Torah asks of us every single day. Hayesh lochem av. Do you live with your parents? Do you live with your grandparents? Do you take the ancestry from which you came and make them part and parcel of your life? Earlier this year, Time magazine ran a cover story about our current generation. As we know, every generation is given its own nickname. For example, those who came from the age during the time of World War II are referred to as the greatest generation. Those that came from the generation between 1943 and 1960, what are they known as? The baby boomers. The generation before this one was called Generation X. So what's this generation? Those coming into adulthood from the year 2000, Time magazine labeled them the Millennial generation. Now, of course, it's typical for older folks to always be nostalgic and to always look apprehensively at the new generation and lament, oh, it's not what it used to be. But having said that, I think that when the defining feature of a generation is its narcissism, we have a problem on our hands. Because under the words the Millennial generation, on its cover, Time magazine put these words, the me generation. Essentially saying that this is perhaps the most narcissistic, self-centered, and self-absorbed generation ever. It's all about me. A year ago, there was an event called the Teen Choice Awards, during which an award was presented to an actor named Ashton Kutcher for some role that he played. Now, he went up to accept this award, and all the kids and the teens in the audience are screaming wildly and adoringly. Their idol is coming up on stage, and of course, they're expecting to hear that usual empty, meaningless speech about you love me and I love you and we're the greatest in the world. That's not what happened. As a matter of fact, what happened was so remarkable that this video clip of this particular talk went viral the very next day. Because the actor came up to the mic and he said, do you know what opportunity looks like? It looks like hard work. Do you know what sexy is? Sexy is being smart and educated. It's being thoughtful. It's being generous. There are no shortcuts in life. You have to work hard to make your way up. Life is hard, but it is only by toughing it out that life becomes good. He's saying this to a room of teenagers. The reaction in that room was one of utter befuddlement. They're looking at each other. What's he talking about? They're not used to such words. What happens to if you dream it, it will be. They kept waiting for the punchline for him to say he was just messing with them. He might as well have been delivering a message from another planet. Because rather than working hard and earning their advancement and achieving their successes, there's this toxic sense of entitlement pervading the lives of young people today. Everything should be handed to them on a silver platter. Why? Because ever since they were in diapers, they've been told over and over and over again how extraordinarily special they are. There was this very successful businessman who wanted to give his new son-in-law a very warm welcome into the family. And so right before the wedding, he calls him in and he says, my dear new son-in-law, I'm going to give you 50% ownership of my company. From now on, you and I, we're equal partners. You'll go down to the factory each day, you'll learn the ropes, we'll be in 50-50. So the son-in-law says, factories, they're messy places, it's not for me. I'm not gonna work in a factory. All right, the father-in-law, nice guy, says, you know what, forget the factory, I'll put you in the front office, you'll oversee the administration side of the business. Are you kidding me? You're going to put me behind a desk? You're going to make me work behind a desk every single day? I'm not interested. Now, this father-in-law businessman starts getting a little frustrated. He says, look, I made you half owner of a major company that I've put 50 years of my life into. I offered you management of the factory, you turn it down. I offer you management of the business office, you turn me down. What do you want to do? What am I going to do with you? So the son-in-law says, well, you can always buy me out. This is the mentality of today. It's mine because of who I am. This woman writes in an article how she's waiting on the line at a coffee shop and she observes two teenage girls in front of her. They take their iced coffees that they order, but before they drink, they have a ritual. They stick their straws in their mouths. They stand cheek to cheek. They make identical, exaggerated faces. They take out their iPhones and they take a picture of themselves doing this. And within a second, they send it out to the whole world so the whole world should see their cute two faces with the straws in their mouths. Look at me, we're having coffee. Look at me, we're swimming. Look at me, I'm shopping. Look at me, I'm lying here doing absolutely nothing, but look at me. That's this generation. Selfies, wherever you go. And them selfies, and we're putting it out there because the world needs to know what you're doing at every single second. Someone out there must be dying to know what I'm doing right now. And if it's not so interesting, let me embellish it a little bit. After all, the last thing you want to be today is unpopular. If you have less than 100 friends on Facebook, you are a schmagegi. You're a nobody. Whether it's iPhones, iPads, iPods, or all the other tchotchkes that are out there, I can't keep up on all the names. Whether it's Facebook, or Twitter, or Viber, or Instagram, or WhatsApp, or Tango, or Skype, or hundreds of other of these social media outlets, our kids today are hooked up 24/7. A study shows that the average kid today is on their smartphones 7 hours a day. 7 hours a day, they're hooked up to something. A phone, an iPad, or this, 7 hours a day. You know what the scariest monster today for a child or a teenager growing up? It's called FOMO. FOMO. Anyone in this room know what FOMO means? FOMO means fear of missing out. They have a nickname for it, FOMO. God forbid that they miss out on something. They fight sleep so that they continue to get their text messages all night listening to that ping, because God forbid they may miss out on what someone wore that day and where they got it. Now, it used to be that celebrities were famous for certain achievements. They won an Academy Award for Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director. People were famous for what they accomplished in the world of academics, in politics, in sports, in art, in literature, in film, on theater. Today we have a new phenomenon. People are famous for being famous. It's odd. The most viewed programs on television today are reality shows. These people announce to the world, come into my world. I want you to look at my self-absorbed, dysfunctional life. And millions of people tune to look, and they're not quite sure why. They did a study and found that of all the different types of celebrities out there, the most narcissistic and self-centered of all were not actors, not comedians, not musicians. It was reality TV stars. Obsession with self is all about all these people have to offer. One reality TV show had a girl planning her 16th birthday party, and she insisted on having a major road blocked off so that a marching band can precede her grand entrance on the red carpet. 16 years old. This is supposedly real people doing real things. And this is what kids today are coming to accept as to how people behave in real life. They see up close what others have and how others live, and then they feel deprived if they don't have these things. They're always suffering by comparison to someone who seems to have it better. I also want fame and fortune. Why not? Why could Snooki have it and not me? You know, there's a service out there where you can hire a fake paparazzi. I kid you not. You hire paparazzi to follow you for a day. And parents are buying this for their 16-year-old girls on their sweet 16 as gifts, so that they can feel what it must be like to have photographers follow you into a Starbucks coffee shop. They can stage it where people rush up to you to ask for your autograph so that you can live in this fantasy world. How many kids, sadly, from ordinary homes are being given plastic surgery procedures at the young age of 16 years old? And it's not to repair some disfigurement or defect in their appearance. It's about my looks are not perfect, my figure, my clothes, my music, my tattoos, my stuff. The me generation. These are the ideals that flash across the screens of our kids' tablets and smartphones 7 hours a day. This is the MTV culture, where maladjusted and exploited kids like Miley Cyrus and Justin Bieber and Lindsay Lohan become the role models for the next generation. And that's frightening. That's quite scary. You know, back in the day, young people would be anti-establishment. These kids are not anti-establishment. For them, there is no establishment. It's empty. There's nothing but self. And by the way, it's not just kids. Although this culture is having its most adverse effects on young people, adults are by no means immune. How ironic it is that with all the social media, with all this myriad of ways that we now have connecting and communicating, we as a society are the most socially and spiritually disconnected generation of all time. Because if you are connecting with everybody, you are in fact connecting with nobody. When the extent of your interaction with other human beings is through an inanimate screen, when your deepest emotions are expressed through emotions like smiley faces and sad faces in a text message, when everything is reduced to a like or not like, you're not quite developing the stuff of which deep and meaningful relationships are made. You can be having a conversation with somebody, and while you're talking to them, they're texting. You're talking to them, and they're doing this. And you say, I'm talking to you. Yeah, I'm listening. I'm listening to every word. And this happens every single day. It's not just a caricature anymore where you see two friends or a group of friends sitting in a restaurant all together. They're having lunch or a dinner together, and every single one around their table is on their smartphones. That they're having dinner together. FOMO, because God forbid they may be missing out on something in the world going on. And it's the same thing with family life. Before dinner and after dinner and during dinner, you used to take road trips and travel and see the beautiful countryside. Today, in every road trip, every kid's got their own tablet and everyone is busy doing their own things. So instead of seeing the world, instead of traveling together, we're just on our tablets day in, day out. We're so plugged in that we have become disconnected. We're not only disconnected from others, but we're disconnected from ourselves, from our true, deeper inner selves. Because when you have all this stuff going on, you're texting and you're tweeting and you're surfing and you're emailing and you're downloading, can you really be asking yourselves the deeper and more important questions of life? Can you really be contemplating issues that will elevate your soul? Now, don't get me wrong, this talk is not a talk against modern technology. Because that same tablet and that same smartphone has made the study of spirituality accessible to every single human being on the face of the earth. We can use this technology, if used the right way, to bring spirituality and deeper meaning to every soul on the face of the earth. When the Baal Shem Tov said that Mashiach will come, when the fountains of Hasidus will be spread to every single part of the world, the Baal Shem Tov envisioned an internet generation, where there is no longer a human being in the world that does not have access to Hasidus, to the deeper meanings of Torah. So clearly this technology was gifted to us by God Almighty to utilize properly, but like everything else good in life, it can be abused. It can take us off the path. It can have constructive uses and destructive uses. So my friends, let's take a look at an age-old heritage for some answers. The first thing that we need to establish is that narcissism is the antithesis of what the Torah is all about. It's the very opposite of everything we represent as Jews. In the words of ethics of our fathers, im ein ani li mi li, if I'm not going to take care of myself, then who will? But then the Mishnah continues, ucheshani la'atzmi ma'ani, but if it's all about me, then what am I? Judaism recognizes the importance of self. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take responsibility for yourself. You have to stand up for yourself. But if that's all there is, if it's only about you, ma'ani, then what am I? The Torah's way of life is about balance, a balance between a healthy sense of self and a sense of caring for others. In his book about the Holocaust, Rabbi Dov Meisels tells a devastating story that he experienced firsthand in the Auschwitz concentration camp. In the slave labor section of that dreadful place, the Nazis, Yamach Shemam, announced one day that 1,600 boys were to be rounded up. Those deemed fit for labor would live, those deemed unfit would be sent to the gas chambers. By the time they were done with their selection, 1,400 children were sentenced to die. 200 children were to be spared and put to work. That night, the capos herded 1,400 precious Jewish children into an enclosed area where they were held for 24 hours without food or water. During that 24-hour period, some of the fathers who had smuggled in cigarettes and money and other valuables into Auschwitz tried to bribe the capos to get their sons out of this holding cell. The problem was that the Nazis knew the exact count. They knew 1,400. And if the count was to be short, the capos would be held responsible and would be shot. So if a capo accepted a bribe to free one boy, what did that mean? He would go take one of the other from the 200 whose lives were spared and replace him in the room with the 1,400. So one of the fathers, whose only child was in the stockade to be put to death, came to Rabbi Meisels, who was in the concentration camp at the time and served as its rabbi. And he said to him, I have the following question. My son, my only son, is amongst those who were taken to be killed. I have the money to ransom him. But if I do it, I know what that means. Another boy will be taken in his place. Rabbi, by Torah law, may I save my son at the expense of someone else. Tell me, Rabbi, whatever you say, I am prepared to obey. Upon hearing the question, Rabbi Meisels looked at the man trembling before him and began to tremble himself. Finally, with his voice quivering, he said, I can't give you an answer. I don't have any of my books here. I don't have my library here in the concentration camp to do the proper research. I can't answer your question. The man wouldn't accept his response. I have but precious few minutes. I need clarity on my question. I still have an opportunity to save my child. I need a clear ruling. Rabbi Meisels broke down and he said, Ich kann nicht. I can't answer this question. I have no one to consult with. Ich kann nicht. The father said, Rebbe, my child's life hangs in the balance. If you won't give me direction, how will I know what the right thing to do is? All the questions I've asked you the last few weeks, you never had a problem giving me an answer without your books and without anyone to consult. Now when I need you most, please, Rabbi, give me an answer. And Rabbi Meisels broke down and he fell to the ground crying, Ich kann nicht, ich kann nicht, ich kann nicht. I can't answer your question. To which the father said, I know what that means. I know if there was any way that you could permit me to save my child's life, you would tell me so. And since you have not said that, I can deduce that the Torah does not allow me to do it. And if that's what the Torah says, I will not take any steps to remove my only son from this group. And with that, this sobbing man walked away. He did not save his child that night, and he had to live with this for the rest of his life. Can we begin to fathom such a thing? Such depth of honor and character, of pure self-sacrifice, the likes of which Abraham bringing his son on Mount Moriah. Such commitment, such higher sense of values and ideals, it's beyond our concept, beyond words. Never again should any human being ever have to be tested that way. God knows we've come through enough of these tests in our history. But how can we even process such a story through the filter of today's perspective on life? The juxtaposition is so out of whack that it borders on the absurd. And yet, my friends, I stand before you today and I tell you that the spirit of those giants who came before us live on within us. I stand before you to declare that with all the mishigas that's out there today, we can turn it around. We can buck the trends of narcissism and disconnectedness of this society and create something altogether different for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren, and for our communities. As the Lubavitcher Rebbe would always say, it's not about introducing anything new into your life. It's about simply brushing off some of the accumulated dust and revealing that which is already there and has always been there. Now that we've got all the toys of life, perhaps it's time for us to look at the joys, the true and meaningful joys of life. You see, true happiness doesn't come from the latest iPhone or iPad or tablet. It doesn't come from physical pleasures. Even the world's best chocolate goes bland after the third bite. It doesn't even come from tranquility. True happiness comes from feeling connected. It comes from friendships. It comes from relationships, not with keyboards, but with God, with family, with friends, with other human beings. And how do we forge such connections? There's only one way: by giving. The Hebrew word for love is ahava. Ava has the root word have. Have means to give. Real love comes from giving. Giving of yourself. Giving from your heart. Now, it may seem counterintuitive to some, but the fact is that the more you give, the happier you are. While the more you're into yourself, the more miserable you are. If you go into any bookstore, you can find hundreds, perhaps thousands of self-help books on the subject of happiness. But we can sum it up with one simple word. Have. Give. Give of yourself. All surveys and statistics show that people who participate in religious life are happier people. Why? It's very simple. Because involvement in religious life, in community, by definition means that it's not all about you. You're part of a group. You're part of something bigger. If you're a loner and not part of a community, you don't have those opportunities to share, to give, to connect. And this shows itself in times of celebration, in times of pain, in times of joy. A community comes together. Someone recently passed away in our community, quite young, leaving over 3 young children. And the community rallied within minutes. The house was filled with people. Children were taken care of. Shiva was taken care of. This happens in communities, Jewish communities all over the world. We bond together. We give. In the greatest of times and the most difficult of times, have. You give of yourself. There's a pediatrician in Israel who tells the story how one evening, when he was on call at the hospital, he saw a young woman, a bride. She was in her wedding gown. And she's walking the halls of the pediatric ward of the hospital. Now, this was an odd scene because if she's a bride, a young bride, she doesn't have a child here, and she's in the wrong ward if something happened to her and she needed medical care, she wouldn't be in the pediatric ward. So he went over to her and he said, "What are you doing here?" It's an odd scene to see a wedding gown walking the halls of the pediatric ward of a hospital. I want you to listen closely to the explanation. So she said, a kala, a bride, on the day of her wedding is a balas chus. She has special merit. She has special power to bestow blessings upon others. So I came here right after the chuppah so that I can bless all these children so that they should have a complete and speedy recovery. The day of her wedding, people are waiting in the dance hall. The photographer is nudging. Where's the bride? And what does she need to do? She needs to go look at some children to give them a blessing. Because this is a moment where she has the power to give. That's Yiddishkeit. That's Judaism. That's happiness. That's the antithesis of narcissism. That's have. That's giving. To give is to live. Opportunities to give come in many different forms at many different times. On the home front, it begins with spending quality time with our families, having meal times together, perhaps with a new rule, shut the phones down during dinner, playing games together, studying and exploring new things together, even taking trips and vacations is giving, it's spending quality time with family. These are the things family life is made of. Parents need to be parents, which means we must be there to love and to nurture and to guide and to help our children, not just to be our buddies. There has to be that sense of responsibility, accountability, so that kids don't grow up feeling entitled. They need to know that some things you work for and you work hard for. There was this teenager who had just passed his driving test. This kid was a bit of a rebel. He didn't take his studies too seriously. He let his hair grow down to his shoulders. But like all kids, when they get their licenses, the first thing they say is, "Dad, can I get the keys?" You know, we dread those moments. You ever take your kid to the DMV for their road test and you're pacing back and forth, you're more nervous than your kid. And each time I've done this now with five of my children so far, I go through the same thought process. Do I want him or her to pass or not? Deep down, what do I really want? Of course I want to see that big smile, "Dad, I passed," right? But do I really, really want that? Do you want your kid on the freeway in California? 5 of them? You see your insurance bills lately? So here's this kid, not doing well in school, long hair, hippie-like, passes his road test, "Dad, can I get the keys?" So father says, "Look here, son, I'm going to make a deal with you. If you study your Torah and bring up those grades, if you do well in math and social studies, bring up those grades, and you take a haircut, come back to me, I'll give you the keys." A month goes by. Boy comes to his dad, "Dad, can I have the keys?" Father says, "Son, we had a deal. Grades in Torah, gone up, very good. Math, social studies, grades went up, very good. But the hair, still there. Deal was, got to take your haircut." So being a clever man, the young man says to his father, he says, "I've been thinking about that part of the deal, Dad. You know, I learned in Torah school," so he knows how to, "that Samson had long hair. And I've also seen these pictures, you know, the movies, they have Noah with long hair. They even have Moses in some of these films with long hair. Well, if it's okay for the biblical characters, why isn't it okay for me?" To which the father responded, "Well, it was also okay for those guys to walk wherever they went." You gotta set the rules. I once heard a great expression: the 2 best things you can give your children are roots and wings. Think about that, roots and wings. Roots means we teach them about who they are, where they come from, what they should stand for in the world. And wings mean we enable them to soar in life, to teach them to be independent, responsible, hardworking, productive members of society. Tell them that they're special, not just because they're your kids, not just because they're pretty or they're handsome. Tell them they're special because they have something to offer the world, that they have something to give. There's a rabbi back east, his name is Pesach Krohn. Pesach Krohn has this ritual every Friday afternoon, not just that he blesses his own children, but he calls a little girl to give her blessings before Shabbat as well. That girl that Rabbi Krohn calls every week comes from a broken home. Her father basically abandoned her and the family when she was quite young. So in order that she not feel deprived, he calls her every Friday before Shabbat, and he recites the traditional blessings over the phone. Yismach Elokim, Kesara, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. God should make you like our matriarchs, like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. And one Friday, as Rabbi Krohn was preparing to make his weekly call, a question came to his mind. Every one of these matriarchs that he's blessing this girl with came from a hard life. Sarah didn't have children for a very, very long time, and then she needed to deal with a Hagar and an Ishmael. Rebekah's husband was blind, and she had a wicked son named Esav. Rachel had no children for the longest time. Leah didn't feel that much loved. So what kind of blessing is it that we give our daughters? Blessings of misery? We should be like them, or all four lived extremely difficult lives. And as he's pondering this question, the thought of this sweet little girl he was about to call came to his mind, and the answer came to him as well. The point is that all four matriarchs overcame their obstacles. They faced tremendous hardships, and yet look at how they weathered the storms and rose to every occasion with faith, with their resolve intact. For every challenge that came their way, they didn't become angry. They didn't become bitter. They didn't become depressed. And through it all, they gave, and they gave, and they gave. Yes, they lived hard lives, but they lived happy lives, meaningful lives. And that's why we bless our daughters to be like them. You're going to face challenges in life. Every life is filled with challenges and obstacles. But we need to learn from our matriarchs how to overcome them, how to keep our faith intact through them, and how to continue to give. Whatever life throws at you, don't let it break you. In the face of adversity, we are to be like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. Indeed, our Torah tells us all types of stories. Some of them are happy stories. Some recall great victories and triumphs. Some setbacks and defeats. The Torah doesn't sugarcoat reality for us. It's all there. It teaches us and our children that yes, there'll be bumps in the road of life, but through it all, you've got to keep that sense of balance about you. I've spoken over the years, especially at these retreats and at my center, a great deal about my father, Alav Shalom. My father was my inspiration. He was my role model. For everything that my father lost in his younger years, being the only survivor as an entire family from the Holocaust, and for all that he suffered, there was something so positive and optimistic about him. My father passed away 2 years ago, and I miss him tremendously. And I feel that gaping hole left in my heart after his passing. But that message of his optimism through it all remains with me every single day. And that's when I have to ask myself the very question I started with today. Asked to a very young Rabbi Soloveitchik and his classmates in a Russian cheder in the year 1910. Hayesh lachem av. Do you have a father? Is your father present in your life? Do we keep the character and the courage of the previous generations, including those we call the greatest generation? Are they the driving force of our lives today? In his last words to the Jewish people, Moses says, Sha'al avicha v'yagetcha. Ask your father, and he will tell you. Speak to your elders, and they will say to you. You see, this is what Moshe is saying to us. We all wish we had this crystal ball that can tell us each decision, if this is the good decision to make, the wrong decision to make, the right decision to make. We all wish we knew the future, but we don't. God didn't give us that crystal ball. But God did give us something that can guide us. Your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. Speak to them. Find out from them. Find out from their history what worked for them, what pathway they followed. Why learn the hard way about what works in life and what doesn't, when you can benefit from the experience of others who have been there before? The beauty of Judaism is our tradition. We have 3,700 years of wisdom given over to us, dating back to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. We don't have to guess what works. We know what brings joy and fulfillment in life. And we also know what leads to aimlessness and to despair. We know what enables a nation to survive and to thrive from generation to generation. And we also know what brings about its demise and destruction. We know it. These are the facts of our history. That's our crystal ball. So why don't we look into it and gain wisdom accordingly? And one of the things that we would see so crystal clear in this crystal ball of learning from our ancestors is a gift we have that perhaps answers the questions that we ask today. How do we change this generation? How do we take a generation like this and make it focus on that which indeed will benefit ourselves, our families, our communities, our world? And this gift is in that Torah. And the gift is called Shabbat. All throughout our history, Shabbos has been that secret weapon in the face of many challenges of the past. It is the most effective antidote to the culture of today. You see, it begins Friday night with the lighting of the Shabbat candles, and it ends some 25 hours later in the same way. And in between, no telephones, no televisions, no tablets, no internet, no Facebook, no Twitter, no FOMO. 25 hours of tranquility, of God, of family, of relationships, of community, the real way, face to face, not on a screen. We put the screens aside. We focus on real life. We connect to others the way it was always meant to be. We dress in fine clothes. We eat delicious foods by candlelight. We spend quality time with family and friends around the table. We sing songs. We make small talk or meaningful discussions. We can learn Torah. We can speak about matters from the heart. We go to shul. We pray together. We socialize together. We have a kiddush together. We can visit an individual that may be ill and in need of companionship. No commercial interruptions, just life. The beauty of spirituality and the beauty of family. One of the great Hasidic mystics of yesteryear was known as the Chose, the seer of Lublin. When the Chose was a child, he lived near a forest, and almost every day he would venture off into the woods by himself. His father, who was very tolerant and understanding, didn't want to interfere with his son's daily excursions, but he was also concerned about his kid going into a forest all alone. A forest could be a dangerous place. So one day he pulls his son aside and he says, Yaakov Yitzchak, I noticed that you go into the forest every day. And I don't want to stop you from doing that, but I'm concerned about your safety. So tell me, why do you go there every day? What is it that you do there every day? And this little boy says, I go into the forest to find God. I go into the forest to find God. Well, his father was deeply moved. You know, you have your kid talking to you about finding God. Who wouldn't have nachas? But his father also needed to correct his son, and he said, I'm very pleased that you do that, but certainly, son, you know that God is the same everywhere. God's just not only in the forest. God's here too. To which the boy responded, I know God is everywhere. I know God is the same everywhere. But I'm not. I feel differently in the forest. My friends, we need to shut down, and whether figuratively or literally, we need to go into that forest and find God. We need to stop and smell the roses, get more in touch with nature, get more in touch with life, get more in touch with ourselves. As the boy said, it is because I'm not the same when I go to the forest that I'm able to find God. Shabbos allows us to go to the forest. God is the same God Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as well. But we're different on Shabbos, and we feel God differently on Shabbos. In 1995, as the walls of communism came crumbling down, the Bryski family emigrated from Russia and made Aliyah to Israel, leaving their elderly parents behind. They settled in Dimona, which is primarily a secular Israeli town near the Negev. They absorbed the culture of the area without any real involvement in Judaism. Nevertheless, they enrolled their daughter Esther, who was named after a great-grandmother. They enrolled her in a religious school due to the high educational standards and reputation of that particular school. As Esther grew, she took a liking to the school, she took a liking to the Torah studies, and with time she decided to become a Shabbat observer. As you can imagine, this presented quite a challenge for the rest of the family to have one member of the family keeping Shabbos, as the rest of the family did not. The family would go on trips, she wasn't able to go. The family would be engaged in other activities, secular activities on Shabbat, she couldn't participate. But it was a family that understood. It was a family that accepted it. And they didn't judge her for it, and she didn't judge them. They knew how to work it out. And Esther begins to become more and more observant, and the family continues to go their way. One day, the father, Alex, announced that he had gotten word that his mother would be coming to Israel for a visit. She had not seen the children and the grandchildren. It's been 15 years, and she's now coming for a visit. There was a great deal of excitement in the family that Babushka was going to arrive after this 15 years of separation. Everyone in the family is excited, including Esther, and they're all planning. They're going to go to the airport, and the signs they're going to hold at the airport, and all the different gifts they're going to bring to the airport. And it was only right before the arrival that Esther asked her father, Alex, so what day is Babushka arriving, for her father to say, on Shabbat. Esther looks at her father and says, Shabbat, I can't go to the airport. Her father says, Esther, but 15 years, come on. How could you not? It's your grandmother. And Esther says, I promise you, Dad, I will stand by the front door of the house. And as she comes, I will be the welcoming committee to the home. But please, please, it's been years now, don't make me get into that car on Shabbat. Don't push it. Father said, okay, I accept, not a problem. That Shabbat came, the whole family is at the airport, all with their signs and their gifts, and Babushka comes off the plane, and there's all go, where's Esther? Where's Esther? Esther's waiting for you at home. Esther's waiting, okay. And indeed, they pull up at the house, Esther, as promised, waiting at the front door of the house, and they hug and they embrace, and a few hours go by. And when the grandmother is alone with Esther, she says, Esther, can I ask you a question? Were you too busy today that you couldn't come to the airport with the rest of the family to greet me? Esther says, no, Babushka, I wasn't too busy. But you see, I have become a Shomeret Shabbat. I would have loved to greet you, but I couldn't because today is Shabbos. I hope you forgive me. At that point, Esther's grandmother reached out to kiss her grandchild. She wrapped her arms around her tightly for a few minutes without saying a word, and finally she said, my dear Esther, you're named after my mother, and today you have given me a gift I never expected. When I was a little girl, my mother and my bubby, they would tell me all about Shabbat, how beautiful it was to observe it when they were younger, how they would light the candles, how they would have the chicken soup, how they would sing songs around the table. And then it became dangerous in Russia to observe. I came here to be reunited with my children and grandchildren. I never thought I would also be reunited with my parents and my grandparents. Thank you, my dear child. My friends, as with the Wi-Fi, those connections are always there. It's in the spiritual ether. All we have to do is log onto it. And I'll tell you, there's no reason in the world to think that this generation cannot rise to every bit of that greatness. They can tune into the spiritual Wi-Fi. No matter what Time magazine may have to say about this generation, in spite of everything, the millennials have many, many positive things going for them as well. Kids and teens today are a lot more flexible and adaptive to new realities. They're willing to accept things that the prior generation were not willing to accept. They're more innovative than all prior generations. They tend to be more positive and optimistic about the future. They're less rebellious than more recent generations. They just want to have a better understanding of why we do what we do. With all of this technology, they have capacities and opportunities to do things our grandparents could never have dreamed of doing. But we need to role model it for them. If properly directed and motivated, they can utilize the tools they have to accomplish amazing things. That challenge is ours more than it's theirs. Are we prepared to role model this for them? Are we prepared to make Shabbat for them? And if you're already keeping Shabbat, you're not off the hook. Bring more people into that home. Make Shabbat an experience in your community and in your home. There's more than hope for the millennials. There's a great promise for the millennials. But it starts with us, right here in this room. We must do our part. If we role model and guide them, they will anxiously and joyfully follow us. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you.